Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the first ever Religion for Breakfast live stream. Let me know if this thing is working. Currently says 0 viewers. Let's see here. 3 viewers, okay. Welcome, first ever live stream. This is gonna be fun. I have a big mug of green tea. I have the live subscriber count over on my second monitor. We're at 49,916. So, and my bedtime is in 2 hours. We will see if we can hit 50,000 between now and my bedtime. And I don't think green tea has enough caffeine in it to keep me awake. So, let's see if I can get this chat bar working. I am still very new to this whole live stream thing. All right, there we go. We can hear you. Cool. The beard, yeah, that was a end of the semester project for me, where last fall I was getting so busy with grading papers and getting to class on time that I just stopped shaving. And then I went to Jerusalem. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep growing this. And everyone seems to, it's part of my brand. I need to change the little Religion for Breakfast character to match the beard. Alexa, can we hit 50K subs? So welcome to Genetically Modified Skeptic. He is another YouTuber that I respect. Glad to see you in the chat. Let's see. Welcome everyone, this is great. 44 people watching, this is crazy. So, it is the beginning of the fall semester for me. I'm teaching a class at Boston University. And I'm writing my dissertation. And I am making videos. Theo Maki asks, would you ever do a video on Zoroastrianism? Yes, the answer is 100% yes. I am planning on a Zoroastrian video this semester because I put a poll on my Patreon supporters saying, would you rather see a video on Manichaeism or Zoroastrianism? And they voted for Zoroastrianism. So that's what we're doing. Chris 0081234 asks if I'll do anything on Mesoamerican religion, and the answer is also yes. I am planning a video on human sacrifice and the Aztec religion coming in January. If I can do both Manichaeism and Zoroastrianism, I would like to. It's a matter of, do I have enough time? So like I said, I'm trying to write a dissertation so I can finally get my PhD, trying to teach a course this semester, so the videos take a long time. So I'm aiming for 3 videos per month. Zoroastrianism is in there, Aztec religion is in there. Manichaeism is gonna have to be pushed back till next year, 2019. So very busy schedule. But you know, if I had my way, I would just do a video on every single religion out there. Just, there are 24 hours in the day. Yeah, congrats on writing my dissertation. Not so much congrats on finishing it yet. I should be done by now, but you know, it's hard to write. It's hard to write a dissertation. There is an Introduction to Sikhism coming out next month. I'm gonna say middle of October. And then I have a Halloween special coming out on Halloween on the history of hell. And what else do I have? I have a review of the Museum of the Bible coming out, which is the new museum in Washington, D.C. Daniel Messier asks what my dissertation is on. Very good question. I've never talked about my dissertation. My dissertation is on early Christian magic, using Christian liturgical phrases on magical objects like amulets and inscriptions on your doorway that's meant to protect your house from demons, And I'm interested in this intersection of the traditional Christian religion, the liturgy, and the more private devotion of amulets and protecting your house from, all kinds of dangers. So it's kind of protective magic meets liturgical studies. It focuses mostly on the late antique Eastern Mediterranean. So I focus on Asia Minor, the Levant, so Syria, Israel, Palestine. Yeah, it's all archaeological. Most of my data comes from the actual artifacts. So I'll look at a corpus of amulets from Syria, for example, and yeah, kind of ask the question, why was the liturgy thought to be magically powerful? Why chant a liturgical phrase like "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty" in church and also put it on your amulet? It's a very interesting intersection of public and private, religion and magic. So stay tuned. It's going to be published as a dissertation someday. All right, reading through comments. Genetically Modified Skeptic asks, do you get many comments criticizing your approach? And by my approach, I'm assuming you mean like a religious studies academic approach. I get criticized by a lot of people that think I am pushing a bias, where some people think I'm a secret Catholic operative. Some people think I'm a secret atheist trying to destroy religion. But really, I'm just trying to explore this huge aspect of human experience. Religion is cross-cultural. It's been around for, all of human history. Why can't we study this like we study any other field of sociology, anthropology, history? So yeah, I guess I don't get many people criticizing that methodology because they assume I'm an apologist of some sort, which is frustrating. Code Killers asks, what's my favorite religion? My favorite field of study is Christianity between 300 CE and 600 CE. That's why I chose to do a dissertation or a PhD on this field. A side interest, I'm really interested in new religious movements. So, small sectarian groups that popped up since the 1950s. I'm just so interested in that sociological phenomenon of religions being invented. Let's see what else. Scrolling through comments. Is the Museum of the Bible the one where they stole artifacts from Iraq? Yeah. Well, technically, they didn't steal them. They were caught. They were slapped with a civil forfeiture law of some sort from the for illegally smuggling Iraqi artifacts. They were sending cuneiform tablets from Iraq in little boxes to Hobby Lobby that said tile samples on the boxes, which is pretty sketchy. You don't just put tile samples on a box of cuneiform tablets. So they were slapped with a civil forfeiture suit and had to pay a huge fine to the U.S. government, technically smuggling. So yeah, not the best thing. And that upcoming video is probably the meanest I'll ever be on Religion for Breakfast, but I feel like I'm being critical for a good reason, where it's like, hey, I study ancient artifacts, I study ancient religion, and this is not good practice. I hope they change their ways. It's not like I'm against educating the public about the Bible, but that museum is highly problematic. All right, more comments. More comments, so much. Good introductory sources for learning about world religions. Go to the Harvard Religious Literacy Project's website. They have a lot of resources. I know a lot of people that work for the Harvard Religious Literacy Project. Excellent scholars, excellent work going on there. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, this channel, it's kind of flippant. Harvard also has a Pluralism Project website. Oh, I know. Stephen Prothero, a professor at Boston University in my department, has a great book on, he has one called Religious Literacy, and he has another book called God is One. And that second book I just mentioned is a real good introduction to the world religions. So Stephen Prothero, check it out. Oh, this is a lot of people. 86 people, welcome. Let's check the subscriber count. 49,918. We are still 80 subscribers away. I'm still also hoping for us to hit $500 in support on Patreon too. So if any of you are able to, feel free to support this channel. I'm trying to take it to the next level since I'll be graduating soon. I'm facing possible unemployment coming May 2019. Depends on if I can snag a academic position somewhere as a professor. But in the meantime, I'm going to try to double my efforts with Religion for Breakfast. So I'm coming out with 3 videos a month between now and December. Try to up that to 4 videos a month by January. So any support that you're able to, check out Religion for Breakfast on Patreon. Somebody asked that they're applying to a PhD in religious studies. I wonder who that was. I can't find it. Here we go. Ryan Hops asks, I'm going to be applying for a PhD in religious studies. Any tips? It really depends on the field that you're in. So if you're doing ancient religion, like me, you need to know the languages. You need to know Greek and Latin, Hebrew, Syriac, Aramaic. Yeah, there we go. I'd be curious to know what subfield you're applying for. So obviously, if you're going to study Islam in the Middle East, you got to know Arabic. You got to have some regional studies background. A lot of these programs, especially in like Christianity, require an MDiv. Like you need to get your MDiv from a divinity school or at least a master's degree. So for example, I tried to apply to a program at a Fordham University, and they're like, you're not going to be qualified because you don't have an MDiv. I'm like, okay, well, thanks for telling me. So Sufami says, this chat's just gonna be random religious questions that are way too complex and too deep to answer quickly. Yes, this is exactly what is happening with this stream. I don't know what else it could have been though. I could just like talk about my research. I did talk about my dissertation. I could talk about what I want to do with the channel in the next half a year. But answering questions is fun. Does the story of pages of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts being used for fire make you cringe? Yes. Yes, it does. So for example, the Gospel of Judas was put into a storage bin for years and it slowly fell apart. It's like, what idiot put this priceless document into a storage bin in New York, like a humid New York? It goes back to like the Museum of the Bible. Like, why do these people treat these artifacts so poorly? It really, really gets to me. Would you consider doing a video on your religious movements? What percentage could be considered cults? See, cults is so problematic. I have a video on this where I say it's more often than not used as a term of attack. Like, you're a religion I don't like, I'm going to call you a cult. There's a scholar at Northeastern University here in Boston named Megan Goodwin, who I really respect, great research, and she does use the word cult in very specific situations. She says there's sectarian religious groups that are in high tension with their surrounding culture. So for her, it's all about the tension, not necessarily the abuse of authority, not necessarily a charismatic leader, though that usually plays into small religious movements that are in high tension with their surrounding culture. So what percentage could be called cults? I don't know if we can actually quantify that, if we're going to even use that term. That's why I kind of use the term new religious movement or small sectarian religion to try to avoid the baggage that that term comes with. I do a few videos on new religious movements. I talk about Salem. So here in Massachusetts, Salem, where the famous Salem witch trials happened, a lot of new religious movements have kind of treated that as their home base now. The Satanic Temple has their home base in Salem. There's a lot of Wiccans there, and these are new religious movements from the 20th century. So it's very interesting to see this town, because of its history of the witch trials, has taken on this new meaning, which I think is so interesting. Why don't you do a video comparing John the Baptist and Mandeism and John the Baptist Christianity? That's a really cool idea. I'd love to do that. And the same reason why I wanted to do a video on Manichaeism, like these more Eastern religions are super fascinating. I did have a video on John the Baptist and the comparison of baptism to washing in a mikveh, but that obviously didn't bring in a discussion of Mandyism. It's, again, 10 minutes per video. There's only so much I can talk about. Ryan Hops, currently a master's program, hoping to do Norse religion and interaction Christianity. Awesome. That's so cool. You probably need to learn Old Norse. You should look at PhD programs in Scandinavia. One of my best friends was going to do, he does circumpolar archaeology. So he studies like Stone Age, Paleolithic cultures in Alaska. But he originally was going to do research on Viking settlements in Norway. So I wouldn't count out Norwegian or Swedish schools if you're going to do Norse religion, but I don't know enough about it to give really good advice. What else? Will you do late antique magic like the video about curses and magicals? Don't quite understand the question. I do want to do a video on the Incantation Bowls. They're one of the coolest artifacts that I know of. Archaeologists found these Incantation Bowls buried upside down in the corner of houses in Syria and Mesopotamia. They're usually written in Aramaic and draw a lot on Rabbinic Judaism. So Jews in Mesopotamia in the 600s and 700s were writing anti-demon spells into bowls and then putting them upside down in their houses as kind of a defense, like keep demons out of your house or trap them under the bowls. Really fascinating artifacts. So I have a video on like how to make your own curse tablet, which was kind of fun. I've always wanted to do like how to make your own incantation bowl. I just need to find a good sized clay bowl to do it. And I don't know Aramaic, so. Do you do all your editing on your videos? I do most of the editing on my videos. I would say 90% of the time, but the really impressive stuff comes from my brother, E.C. Henry. Some of you might know E.C. Henry already as another YouTuber. He does Star Trek and Star Wars commentary, so all of you should head over to his channel right now. He does a lot of like science education, philosophical discussions in Star Wars and Star Trek, kind of like Wisecrack, but on a smaller level. So he does a lot of the editing because he is a videographer. He's a expert editor, animator, 3D animator. So whenever you see something particularly impressive on my channel, I didn't make it because I'm not an animator, but he did. Let's see. Do you think there's truth that Shintoism caused the Japanese to be extra? There is this. I don't know enough about Shintoism. I love Japanese culture. A fan of anime. I've practiced kendo and karate all my life. My understanding is that the imperial authorities throughout the late 19th and early 20th century kind of rebranded Shintoism as kind of like the state religion. I don't know enough about this, so I don't want to disseminate wrong information here, but there definitely was this tying together of Japanese ethnic identity with Shintoism. Huge swath of destroying Buddhist temples. There was kind of this backlash against Buddhism, which is interesting because Shintoism and Buddhism kind of evolved together throughout the medieval period and the early modern period. So I have a video on iconoclasm, where religious destruction, and this came out of that research. So yeah, I mean, this is what I mean when I say religions are embedded in culture. Like, it's embedded in politics sometimes. And in 19th century Japan, it was Shintoism and imperialistic politics were enmeshed. So like, it's something. This is why I like studying religion, because it touches so many different disciplines. Are you interested in politics? Great, you could do politics and religion. Are you interested in Japanese studies? Great, you can do Japanese studies and religion. How prevalent was the use of Christian magic, and how much of an influence did it have on the formation of religion itself? Christian magic was everywhere. Everybody was doing it. There were amulets, there were inscriptions over the doorway. There were exorcisms that sound like magical spells, and the priests and the monks were sometimes providing the materials. So imagine you're living in a small town in late antique Syria or late antique Asia Minor, 500 CE. It's a slowly Christianizing society. Who's the literate expert in town? Who's the literate scribe? There might be only one, and it's probably a monk or a bishop. So some of these spells, these more Christian sounding spells, must have been written by bishops and monks, which is really interesting when we talk about this separation of religion and magic. For these ancient Greeks and Romans, these ancient Christians, they didn't separate that in their mind necessarily. Now, some Christian bishops did. Guys like Saint Augustine, Saint Jerome, John Chrysostom, I don't know if he's a saint, were super ticked off by the practice of magic. But the reason why they were so ticked off is because everybody was doing it. So that's why I'm always trying to downplay when people say, oh, the church was so powerful and just controlling everybody. I'm like, back then, it wasn't that powerful yet. People could still go get their local amulet and protect, try to protect their house from demons. And the local bishop can't stop them. John Chrysostom would complain about it in his homilies, like, stop getting amulets. You should just rely on Jesus. And that shows, the very fact that he's complaining about that in his sermon shows that he didn't have the power to stop people from doing it. So the answer to the question, ancient Christian magic was everywhere. And it's funny that you mentioned it, because I have the book right here on my desk, Ancient Christian Magic. Who publishes this? Princeton University Press. This is a scholarly text full of ancient Christian spells. I'm using this for the class that I'm teaching this semester. It's amazing, like really interesting stuff. Ryan Hops asked, do I have any recommendations for learning about Christians and magic? I mean, the book I just showed you, Ancient Christian Magic. The scholar David Frankfurter, who's my advisor, he's written extensively on this. Gideon Bohawk, who's based at Tel Aviv University, he's an expert on this stuff. Yeah, just do a Google search for early Christian magic, and you'll find this very niche subfield of scholars like me. Like I could name you a dozen friends and colleagues who research this stuff, and it's like the fun stuff of antiquity. Like, we don't need another book written about Julius Caesar or Cicero, but we need more books written about something that 99% of the population was doing. Theomaki asks, which languages do you speak other than English? I don't speak other languages. I read Latin and Greek and a little bit of Coptic. One of my biggest regrets is not picking up Syriac along the way, because a lot of my research is on ancient Syria, and I just don't know Syriac. So that's a huge gap in my education. So ancient Greek, ancient Latin, and a little smidge of Coptic. Sue Fami says, wow, there's a lot of people in here for a religion live stream. You're right, 109 people. This is great. We're still at 49,918. I was hoping we would hit 50,000 on this live stream. It's only 9:23 though, so we still have an hour and a half till it's my bedtime. I will plug again the Patreon if you're so inclined to support the show. I'm kind of at a point where I see Religion for Breakfast at a turning point. The videos are getting more views, the subscribers are coming in, and I'm graduating soon. And I would love to devote more time to this channel. I envision longer series, so like a series on Hinduism, a series on Sikhism. I've already written out an entire series on the history of religious liberty law in the United States. But making a 12-episode series takes so much time, and I need help editing the episodes. So any help you can give towards the channel, only if you're able. Like, I don't want anyone to feel pressured to support the Patreon. People at the $10 patron level get this cool mug. So, all right, enough self-promotion. Let's get back to questions. Let's see here. Other books I recommend. Actually, these are a good side-by-side here. Any books you recommend? And then C. Trotman asks, how is someone like Karen Armstrong viewed in the academic community? So I'm going to say this with all due respect to Karen Armstrong. Like, I don't want to insult her, but she operates under a methodology of religious studies that is kind of out of date, which is called perennial philosophy. It's the same philosophy that was driving Joseph Campbell. It was the same methodology that drives Jordan B. Peterson today. Perennial philosophy, the idea that all of the world religions are kind of mystically connected, and we can learn something universal about humanity by comparing the different religions. The thing is, religions are so culturally specific. That's a pretty problematic way to study religion, because you then start making these facile comparisons. Oh, I see a water baptism ritual in Sikhism and Christianity. Isn't that interesting? But that comparison doesn't tell us anything, because the water ritual in Sikhism, I think it's called Amritsar, it has a different meaning, even though it looks similar, uses water. It's a completely different cultural context, completely different ritual. So Karen Armstrong and people like her, like Joseph Campbell, are considered simplistic by most scholars of religion. And we prefer a more culturally specific approach, and this is where the scholar Jonathan Z. Smith came in. He came in like a meteor in the 1970s, and he's like, Joseph Campbell and scholars like him are wrong, and here's why. So if going back to the question of books to recommend, check out Jonathan Z. Smith, everything he's ever written. Drudgery Divine is one book. He has a series of articles, I think, that are called Religions, Religious, something like that. And he advocated for a more nuanced comparison of religion, where you have to say, you make an equation. A is like B with respect to C. So you would say, the baptism ritual in Sikhism, and that's an incorrect term here, like the water ritual in Sikhism is similar to Christian baptism with respect to the use of water, but not with respect to this, and this. Like, it focuses your comparison to be more culturally specific. Let's see here. If you support his Patreon, he'll mail you a mug. If you're at the $10 support, if you're at the $5 support, you get monthly live streams like this. So I live stream every month with our $5 patrons. $1 patrons get into the Patreon news feed, where I comment on what I'm doing, what I'm up to. You can participate in polls. So for example, I put a poll out on our Patreon a few weeks ago that said, would you rather see a video on Manichaeism or Zoroastrianism? And they voted for Zoroastrianism. So as a patron, you can participate in those polls. So mugs, polls, live streams, that's what you get. Oh man, so many questions and 115 people. This is crazy. Jerry Chi says, hello, fellow BU grad student. Welcome. Maybe you'll see me on campus. I know a lot of people in the classics department and the art history department. I don't know anybody in other departments. So, Genetically Modified Skeptic asks, do you think ancient origins type shows like Ancient Aliens are harmful as they promote falsehoods about religious history? Yes, 100%. These annoy me so much. They annoy me as a religious studies educator, and they annoy me as an ancient history nerd. Like, blaming aliens for stuff like the pyramids or really fantastic engineering feats denigrates the creativity and ingenuity of these ancient people. Like, I study ancient magic, so it's very easy to say, oh, these people are irrational, they're stupid. These people were brilliant, extremely creative, and they were living in a world with 40% infant mortality, people dying from typhus and cholera left and right, and they had the creativity and agency to invent these magical rituals to try to survive. So yeah, Ancient Aliens TV shows, conspiracy theory channels that are talking about all sorts of weird stuff about ancient Babylon and stuff. It annoys me because it's not as interesting as the actual research. The same goes with some of the pseudo archaeologists that are trying to prove certain stories from the Bible, for example. And I'm like, biblical archaeology as a discipline is way more interesting than this conspiracy theory you invented. Like, pick up a book on biblical archaeology and just be blown away by how cool it is. So, yeah, going back to genetically modified skeptics' question, ancient origin, alien type shows, it's a shame. And there's a lot of YouTube channels about that too. It bums me out. Ditbub says, a video on critical analysis might be useful. So I've been planning this for a long time. Okay, real quick. Stother Sifai asks, what's a good book on biblical archaeology? And I have a really good book to recommend. It's called The Bible Unearthed by an archaeologist by the name Silberman. It's perfect. It's short, it's interesting. It gives you a quick introduction to the archaeology around the Bronze and Iron Age Israel, all the way up to the Second Temple period. You'll get a great introduction to like the historicity of King David, the question of the historicity of Exodus, all from an archaeologist perspective. So The Bible Unearthed, check it out. I do have an Amazon store where I make all my book recommendations. So just go to any of my videos and click on like amazon.com/religion for breakfast or something like that. You'll have a whole list of book suggestions. Yeah, so I'm going to very briefly mention Jesus mythicism. So this has come up a lot. John Smith is right. I agree with the academic consensus that Jesus was a historical figure. The Gospels are composite texts. They're miraculous stories. So, you can't say everything's historical, and I definitely wouldn't say they're eyewitness documents, but there's a kernel of historicity in there. And a lot of that comes from my understanding of first century Judaism. And Jesus fits in the world as a apocalyptic preacher. Go read the Dead Sea Scrolls and you'll see him and the Dead Sea Scrolls writers were swimming in the same theology of apocalyptic thought. Linkums asks, as a religious studies scholar, is atheism considered a religion or something else? Real quick, Linkums is a good friend of mine, an excellent video game blogger and video blogger, so you should go follow Linkums. Atheism, I would say, is not considered a religion. And the reason why is because, for my definition of religion, religions need shared ritual. So not just shared belief, not just a shared identity. And I think atheism sometimes has religious-y things like a shared identity, like going to a ethics society or a humanist society on Sundays. But the key thing that's missing is ritual. Christians across all denominations share the ritual of baptism, the Eucharist. Muslims across denominations or across different forms of Islam share rituals like going the pilgrimage to Mecca, praying. But what would be considered the atheist ritual that's shared across atheists? There's nothing of the sort. So I think anyone that tries to argue that atheism is a religion is missing a huge component of religion, which is action, doing stuff. Religion is something that humans do, not just something that humans think. So keep that in mind. Religion is belief, behavior, and belonging. It's the 3B framework that I talk about in an earlier video. Beliefs, behaviors, like rituals, and a sense of belonging, so a communal identity. I know Theomaki says I'm going to get swamped by mythicists and the Richard Carrier type people. That's why I've never done a video on mythicism. I have planned out a 5-episode series about it. I've written a few lines, but I'm afraid to talk about it because it does bring a lot of people in. I'd rather not get sidetracked. Have I ever collaborated with cognitive scientists in your studies? Yes. Connor Wood, who has appeared on the channel twice before, does a lot of the scientific study of religion, knows a lot of the cognitive science behind the scenes. A good friend of mine at Boston University in my department is going to help me write 2 episodes that are coming from more of a scientific study of religion. One video is going to be on animal religion. So do we see any sort of kernel of religion in higher functioning animals like chimpanzees? So be excited for that video. That's going to be a crazy video. And my recent video, Why Do Strict Religions Succeed, is just all social psychology and cognitive science. That was probably the most fun I've ever had writing an episode. Like it's all this really cool social psychological cognitive studies research. I was just eating it up. So I'm going to have a sequel to that, Why Do Strict Religions Succeed, with are people in strict religions healthier? Because there's some research that indicates they might actually have healthier mental health outcomes, which is interesting. And it's the same sort of phenomenon of being highly committed to a small group. You're more self-controlled. So this is a lot of research from Connor Wood, who's a cognitive scientist. Let's see. Tell us more about the man behind the channel. So my name's Andrew Henry. I used to be a history guy, Roman history. I thought I was going to enter a PhD program in Roman history, applied to 15 schools, was rejected from most of them. One of the schools I got into was a religious studies department. And I thought, well, why not? I'll still study ancient Roman history. Showed up, took classes on religious studies methodology, took classes on Sufism, I took classes on ritualization and theories of ritual, and I just fell in love with religious studies. So now I consider myself a scholar of religion instead of a Roman historian. What else? I swing dance, I do martial arts. I've joined a parkour class recently, so I try to stay active. Huge video game nerd, love Super Smash Brothers, love Star Wars, love Star Trek. So that's a little bit about me. All right, we're at 140 people, 49,927 subscribers. Boom, we're almost to 70. And we have a whole bunch of new patrons. Awesome. 25, 30, 40. Let's see where we're at with the Patreon count. So we're 70 away from 50,000. We could hit it before my bedtime. Great. Let's see if, and we're at $464 on Patreon. So we're almost to $500. So we'll see if we'll hit 50,000 subs or $500 on Patreon first. It's a race to the big 50. Would it be realistic to define religion as the belief in a deity, a greater order to the universe, or the belief in both? This is from Riley C. And I would say that's insufficient. Religion is action just as much as belief, and it's identity just as much as belief. So my own personal definition of religion, and this is influenced by some other scholars that are trying to focus more on the action and identity more than the belief, would be, let's see if I can do this off the top of my head. Religion is a system of beliefs and practices shared by a greater community that is oriented toward the supernatural. That's the best I could do off the top of my head. It has to be shared by a community, has to include actions, and include some sort of identity. That's why I don't say atheism is a religion, because it lacks that key shared ritual aspect. And that's influenced by Durkheim, Emil Durkheim, who says religion is fundamentally a social thing that's oriented towards the society and a community. So a lot of, I would say most religious studies scholars of today are little Durkheims running around. Like Durkheim changed the field. He invented the field, basically. And then Jonathan Z. Smith in the 1970s radically changed the field, because he was the one that kind of debunked the Joseph Campbells of the world. So now it's very much a sociological, cultural studies kind of field. John Green asks, can you recommend me literature about new religious movements? Off the top of my head, I can't think of specific books, but you should look up the scholar Megan Goodwin, Goodwin. She's at Northeastern University. She's an expert on new religious movements, super smart. Check out the podcast, The Religious Studies Project. It's one of the more academic podcasts in this field. I'm an interviewer for that podcast, so you'll hear my voice sometimes. And they have a few episodes on new religious movements. Just be forewarned that it's a highly academic podcast, so it's not for the faint of heart. Al Blackwell asks, I would love to know how you became interested in religious studies. What is the course of your personal intellectual journey? I have a video about this. I was always fascinated in ancient Christian history. I was always fascinated in ancient Roman history. So there was an intersection in college, these two fields, when I started studying late Roman religion. And when I applied to PhD programs, I was rejected for most of them because it's very difficult to get into these programs. And when I ended up in the Boston University program, I took classes on religion and religious studies outside of the field of ancient Rome and ancient Christianity, and just fell in love with it. Like, because I was asked more meta questions, like, what is ritual? Why do humans do ritual? Why do they believe in these systems, these belief systems? And those meta questions fascinated me. I was introduced to sociology and anthropology instead of just history and archaeology. I'm obsessed with the interdisciplinarity of religious studies, because it helps you cross-train. I've read so much sociology and anthropology now. It's hard to separate that way of thinking from my research when formerly I would have just been a historian. M.A. Saunders asks, will you be sharing your dissertation once it's completed? I think so. I think once you finish a dissertation, I'm actually not 100% sure about this, but I think you can agree for your dissertation to be made public as soon as it's completed. And it's held by Boston University. So my institution, Boston University, will have it on file. It's not going to be the most interesting of reads. It's meant for an academic audience. It's not as engaging as Religion for Breakfast. A lot of jargon, but the topic is cool. My topic is on ancient Christian liturgy being used for magical purposes. So the liturgical chants that Christians chanted in church also appear on amulets and spells of all sort. And I kind of ask the question, why are these rituals thought to be powerful? And my argument is the idea that Christians had an idea that when you chant the liturgy, angels appear in the room with you. You're kind of singing along with the angels. And so there's kind of this demonology to the liturgy that people seem to forget. You think it's just chanting and worshiping together, but it's a lot of, in the ancient Christian mind, it's a highly demonological ritual. So it makes perfect sense that it would appear in so it makes sense that it appear in magical ritual. Sorry, I was distracted. Dan H has donated 10 euros. Thank you. Thank you for the interesting videos and reading material. I do think at times in your videos you give a slight pro-religion stance on them. Interesting. I have been accused of that, and I think it's because I don't bash religion. I think the fact that I try to be fairly level-headed, but like in the strict religions video, for example, I come out and say, this is just me defending myself a little bit. That's fine if you think I'm pro-religion, but I think I'm just pro-religious studies because this is interesting. In the strict religion video, I have a whole minute where I'm like, by the way, I'm not condoning the abuse of authority, coercive rituals, coercive religious groups. Like, that stuff is bad, and I'm the first to say that. So yeah, that's interesting, but hopefully that doesn't affect your interest in the material I provide. Pounds. Oh, sorry. Everybody's jumping down my throat because I misread the pound symbol as the euro symbol. Leopoldo Pietriesca asks, please wear that fedora that's hanging on your wall. No, that would be too nerdy even for me. But I do wear it sometimes. Broadcast Brandon says, please wear the fedora. I'm going to try to resist. Let's see. What's your opinion of the documentary hypothesis? So this is referring to the, from my understanding, I'm not a Hebrew Bible scholar. This is the theory that the Torah is a composite document of different scribes, you know, the Yahwist and the priestly scribe. From my understanding, it's the consensus of Hebrew Bible scholars. If there is a Hebrew Bible scholar in the chat, please correct me because I don't know exactly. So as far as I know, that's the reigning theory. And from what I've seen, it makes sense. You know, there's obvious seams in the Torah where a different voice comes in. Like, for example, the creation story is very different in chapter 1 of Genesis as compared to chapter 2 of Genesis. So yeah, I want some I want some Hebrew Bible scholar in the chat to help me out here. The most I know about the Hebrew Bible is archaeological. You know, when I was in Israel, I visited Tel Arad, which is the site that has a temple to Yahweh in a fortress on top of the Tel. I visited Ashkelon, so I saw like the Philistine dog grave. There's a bunch of dogs buried in this Philistine city of Ashkelon, which is super interesting. I'm gonna get myself more tea. So yeah, when it comes to textual studies of the Hebrew Bible, I'm just not quite as up on that. Oh man, the words are coming in fast. What do you think of the use of hallucinogenics in ritual meals and stuff? Very interesting. There's a famous study done at Boston University where Boston University theology students took LSD and then sat in the basement of the church on campus while an Easter service happened upstairs. And the divinity school students said it was one of the most spiritual experiences of their lives. So imagine they're on this trip, this LSD trip, listening to this booming organ upstairs. I think one of them described it as like, I felt like the curtain on the universe was pulled back. So there's this really interesting subfield of religious studies that sees like the interaction of hallucinogenics and visions and religious phenomenological experiences, if you will. So yeah, I think it's great. Thank you for the donation, Chris. I just realized that shakers contradict your last video. Well, shakers are not allowed to have sex. So any religious group that doesn't propagate, even if it's a strict religion, will not do well. So there's always an exception, and the shakers are the exception. Okay, I'm pouring myself more tea because my throat is getting scratchy. We are at 49,929. So interestingly, the subs are going slower than the patrons, which is, let's see, are we at, is the race done already? Let's see, $482. So we're $20 away from 500, and we're 70 subscribers away from 50,000. Stother Safai asks, what kind of tea? It is green tea from Target, the cheap stuff. Oh no! Theo Maki gives me $2 to wear the fedora. Oh my gosh. Martin Stiles, I'm not a scholar, but my father is, and he says that is no longer the rating hypothesis. More emphasis is placed on editing rather than compilation. Interesting. Okay. You know, I should do a video on the documentary hypothesis because I was not aware of that. So I do agree. You can see the seams in the Torah. So there's obviously some sort of process going on here, but I guess I'd be curious to just know what's the difference between compilation and editing. I guess one's a constructive and one's more of a destructive process. Fictional religion videos would be awesome. I've wanted to do a video on religions in the Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, I think, is a very interesting religious world. I wanted to do what is it? A video on American Gods, both the book and the TV show, which also has a very interesting perspective on a religion. I want to do one on Jediism. I want to do one on Star Trek and religion. So if I could do a whole series on pop culture and religion, I've done a few, on Legend of Zelda, Star Wars. This goes back to me wanting to do longer series and why I'm trying to boost the Patreon. Because once I can have a little help editing these videos, I can make them faster. So a series on pop culture and religion, I want to do so badly, and mostly on Star Trek, Star Wars, American Gods, Game of Thrones, Pokemon. I want to do a video on the demonology of Pokemon because a lot of the Pokemon are based off of Japanese intermediary beings called kami. So an upcoming video, I'm going to try to launch this in time for the new Pokemon video game coming out in November, which is the demonology of Pokemon, and just focusing on 5 or 6 different Pokemon that are based off of Japanese demonology. Let's see. A lot of people ask me if I'm ethnically Jewish. I'm not. I'm Anglo. A lot of the Henry family came from England, so we traced us back to the Virginia colony. Lincoln says, yes, get the Christian moms to ban it all over again. Yes. A lot of evangelical Christians thought Pokemon was evil because of the demons they were based off of. So funny joke there, Lincoln's. The depth of Elder Scrolls religious pantheon. Yeah, I don't know enough about Elder Scrolls to do it. No, okay, Theomaki, I'll put the fedora on. You did not waste $2. I'm trying to build goodwill here for the stream. This is a felt fedora from a store here in Boston called Gorin Hat Brothers. It's one of my favorite fedoras. I'm going to wear it for 60 seconds starting now. So mark the time, 9:53. Yes, I have worn this swing dancing. Screenshot this. I have another fedora over here too, actually. Ugh. This is my Indiana Jones fedora. Much more authentic to Indiana Jones. Let's see here. All right, that was 60 seconds, right? Do I seem stressed? I don't seem stressed. Second photo looks better. Well, it's more of a classic. Theomaki is becoming a patron. Awesome. What does that put us at? Still at 482. Yeah, wearing a fedora is very hard here in the 21st century because you look like a douchebag or like an old professor grandpa type. So you have to dress it down. Yeah. Yeah, Lincom's can confirm. He's known me since 2nd grade. So this is normal Andrew. Are you interested in the history of Islam? Yeah, I'm interested in the history of all religions. I would like to do a series on Islam. I have one video on it. Oh, I have another video. I have a video on the Dome of the Rock coming out tomorrow. So be back tomorrow. It's called what is the Dome of the Rock, and it has copious footage that I took inside the Dome of the Rock. I got a special look inside of it. Usually non-Muslims are not allowed inside the Dome of the Rock, but I had a special connection. So stay tuned for tomorrow. It is a 12-minute long video. It's like a lengthy video, 10 minutes, just boom. Architectural history, ritual use, a little bit of the controversy around the site. Should be fun. Let's see. Let's see here. What are some beginning, intermediate, and expert books on ancient magic? Okay, I'm so glad you asked. I'm so glad you asked. So, number one, intro book that every person that wants to study ancient magic must get is this, the Greek Magical Papyri and Translation. This is just a huge compendium of primary source documents of Greco-Egyptian late antique magical spells. It's a must read. Second of all, a book, Ancient Christian Magic, from Princeton University Press. I'm not shilling these books. I'm like literally saying these are amazing books. Let's see what else. Anything on my shelf? My bookshelf is over here. That's my look over here. I mean, anything by David Frankfurter, my advisor. He has a lot of stuff on magic. There's a book called Ancient Jewish Magic. I think it's by Gideon Bohawk, which is pretty good. All of these are intermediate to expert, except for the primary source books, which are... This is a really good question, Daniel Strauss. Aside from animal sacrifice, any religious practices that you found it difficult to study impartially? Religious violence of any sort. There's research on violent rituals like, you know, cutting yourself. There's like this famous practice in Iran, I think, among Shias in Iran, where they like, it's a very fringe ritual. So I'm not saying that this is like all Shias in Iran, but they cut themselves with like swords, and it's very, very disturbing. So that's hard to be impartial. You know, human sacrifice in Aztec religion, obviously. And these new religious movements that are highly coercive and have, you know, abusive authority. Like, this is why I don't necessarily say I'm neutral or I'm impartial. Like, every researcher has biases. Every researcher has an ideology operating in their brain. So it's not like I'm going to look at a ritual that I find, you know, really troubling and just give it a pass. But some of those is just hard to research. Okay, I'm stuck on I can't click back to the chat. Okay. What podcast do I listen to? I listen to the Religious Studies Project. I listen to The Way of Improvement Leads Home by John Fia. He's a historian of American religion. He just wrote a book about the evangelical support of President Trump. So you should all read that book. It's extremely good. And I listened to a podcast called The Ministry of Ideas by the Harvard Literacy Project. Nelson Galvin says, how about Mesoamerican pre-colonial religion? I have a video on Aztec religion coming up in January. I've been planning to do 2 videos, one on Mayan religion and Incan religion as well, but those are in the the back burner. I'm not going to get to those until 2019. So yes, I've been always fascinated by Mesoamerican religion. It's just really interesting. If you can, it's mostly archaeological, because obviously most of the texts we have from that period are post the Spanish conquest. And I know at least one person that's a Mesoamerican archaeologist. I'd have to reach out to him. Genetically Modified Skeptic asks, in early Christian history, was it common belief that the biblical creation and flood were literal accounts? I don't know about the flood. Biblical creation, St. Augustine has this really famous quote. He has a whole exegesis on the book of Genesis. And he kind of chides Christians for talking about the creation of the universe in not reflective ways. He's like, you should think of, he kind of says you should think of Genesis as a mythological text, which is interesting. So at least St. Augustine did. So I highly recommend you go check out St. Augustine's treatise on Genesis. That's the only thing that can pop into my head. I don't know enough about early Christian authors writing about the flood. Let's see what else. Paul Donahue, The Way of Improvement Leads Home. I think it's called The Way of Improvement Leads Home. Way of Improvement Leads Home. It's by John Fia. If you type in John Fia, yeah, The Way of Improvement Leads Home. Lilith Eves, that's a great name, by the way, Lilith. Thanks for the book recommendations. I'll say it again that you can, I recommend, I have like a Amazon store underneath all my videos where you can click and see my book recommendations. Superminer 1280 asks, have you heard of the Ahmadiyya sect in Islam? I probably mispronounced that, but yes, I have heard of that sect. Kind of controversial. I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and there's a huge Ahmadi population there. So yes, I have. That's a good video topic. I should do a video on that. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to get more tea. My hot water is slowly no longer hot. Patron count is at $483. Subscriber count is at 49,932. I don't know if we'll hit 50,000 on this sub, on this live stream. That's all right. We have an hour till bedtime. Okay, here's a question for the stream. I really want to hear your opinion on this. Any plans for a podcast of your own? Even just the audio of your videos would be great. I've been planning a podcast, not planning, I've been thinking about a podcast for probably 6 or 7 months. I bought the equipment and I'm thinking of it, if I ever were to do one, it would be more of a interview-based long-form discussion podcast where I would sit down with a scholar of religion and talk about their research for 30 or 45 minutes. I've been hesitant to start it because A, I don't know podcasting as well as I do YouTubing, and B, why would I devote more time to a podcast when I want to devote more time to make more videos? So this is the catch I'm at. I want to do more videos and the podcast, but I don't know if I can do both. So throwing it out there. Leopoldo says, do the podcast. Samara says, do the podcast. Okay. I'll wait to see if anyone gives me a counter. Because in my mind, I want to. I think it's a great opportunity to do more controversial topics too that would get demonetized on YouTube. I could talk more about politics and religion and the stuff that would get me demonetized, hallucinogenics and religion, that would get demonetized within seconds. My videos on demons get demonetized before they're even posted. So the podcast would be immune to that. Riley C., do the podcast, but don't overwhelm yourself. Your health and sanity comes first. So true. Thank you. So true. Plus, I have a dissertation, right? Do more live streams instead of pods. I would say don't start out doing it weekly. Your YouTube channel has great influence. Maybe do a podcast monthly. That's a good idea. Well, this was my idea with the podcast. I would do like 15 episodes, record them all within a few weeks, and then release them like once every 2 weeks and see if it works. If after the end of 15 episodes of the podcast, people are like, this is awesome, then I would call that season 1 and then start season 2 of the podcast. So, I mean, Riley has said again, don't do it if it's too overwhelming. I don't think it would be too overwhelming because podcasts are so much easier. You just sit down with recording equipment. Audio editing is easier than video editing. So I can picture it being more like relatively simple. I just don't want it to sacrifice videos on the YouTube channel because I consider myself a YouTuber first. So if doing the podcast means only 2 videos a month instead of 3 videos a month, then I might not do it. But if I can do it, I'm very interested. I've been thinking about it for a long time. So religion for Podfist. I love it. That cough, a warning from your body. Yeah, I have a scratchy throat. I've been talking for a long time. And this was after meeting with students all day. I'm teaching a class this semester, so I lecture Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. So I have to do lecture prep sometime tonight or tomorrow. Let's see. Editing podcasts is a huge undertaking. I'm sure it is. Video editing is just so hard. You know, I have to do color correction. I have to set up studio lights. I have to set up a microphone. Like I just don't need to set up as much with a podcast. I just think it would be easier. All right, thank you for the donation, 65 drums. Let's see here. 65 subs to go. You're right. 65 subs to go. And let's see. $17 to go on the Patreon. So we have 144 people watching. If 17 of you donate $1, we'll be at 500. And if 65 of you tell a friend to subscribe, we'd hit 50,000. Have I thought of animating my cartoon avatar? I've thought about that, yeah. I've thought about having like an avatar for all the major religion theorists, you know, Freud and Durkheim and Jonathan Z. Smith. My brother, E.C. Henry, would be doing that because he's an expert animator and illustrator. Valentin Herrera asks, do I speak any other languages besides English? Which somebody asked earlier. Real quick, I read Latin, Greek, and a little bit of Coptic. I do not know any conversational languages, just ancient stuff. And like I said, one of my biggest regrets is not learning Syriac because my research requires me to know Syriac, and I never learned it. Do you know Mark Goodacre's podcast, the New Testament Pod? I do. Mark Goodacre is a fan of the show. He loved the video on Star Wars and fan fiction. So Mark Goodacre's podcast, it posts very infrequently, so maybe once every 3 or 4 months, but he is a excellent New Testament scholar. He has a great podcasting voice, so y'all should go subscribe to Mark Goodacre's podcast, the NT Pod, right now. He's one of those scholars that I like eminently respect. He's one of the few scholars that's kind of skeptical of the so-called Q hypothesis, that there's this other gospel that Matthew and Luke were drawing on. So you can read his book on, you know, the counter argument to the book Q. So that's kind of his claim to fame. What class am I teaching? I am teaching a class called Magic in the Ancient World, where we go through the late antique Roman world and study all the different ways magic was used. So cursing, exorcisms, healings. We talk about kind of the stigmatization of magic. So magic was used to stigmatize women. It was used to stigmatize Christians. But when the Christians got into power, they used it to stigmatize people they didn't like. So both archaeological survey of magic and more of a sociology of magic and how it's used as this way to partition between good religion and bad religion from the perspective of the people in power. What I do is religion, what you do is magic. And that's how kind of the Roman emperors operated, and how the bishops, the Christian bishops, operated once they got more political power. El Jamaicano asks, can politics become a religion? Again, I've said this before, that a religion requires rituals, and I can't really think of like a ritual shared by a political party, but certain aspects of fandom is religious. So I would say there are like religious aspects to politics and political rituals, like singing the national anthem, where religious studies can provide some sort of data to study. Yeah, civil religion. But like, what do you call it a religion, though? I would say it's religious, but like this whole definition of what is a religion is subjective, and there's identity, there's beliefs, there's a sense of belong here. So yeah. Let's see. I think that A Wright asks, will this be saved to your channel so you can view it later? And yes, I think it's automatically saved. Someone wants to point out that Mithra is an Indo-Iranian god, not just an Iranian god. I thought I said Indo-Iranian, but I'm sorry if I didn't. So, yes, that god goes all the way back to India. It's one of the more controversial videos because people like arguing about the cult of Mithras. I wanted to do a video on the Yazidis just because it's very, very relevant to the 21st century, because they, you know, were experiencing violence at the hands of ISIS, from my understanding, or at least were caught up in the wars in Iraq and Syria. I want to do a video on Muslim groups in Yemen too, because Yemen's going through this huge humanitarian crisis and war. Yeah, it's always a challenge of trying to post videos that I find interesting to me, but also videos that are timely and relevant. So here we are in the 21st century. Like, I should do one on the persecution of Muslims in China right now, or Myanmar. Like, I wish if I worked faster, I'd be able to I would push these out to be more timely. Nicholas Getka asks, how has the definition of religion changed over time, academically, historically? I talk a little bit about this on my What is Religion video, but the Roman, the Latin word religio didn't mean religion in our sense of the word. It was more state-sponsored religion, proper religion, what you do at the temples and the right relationship you have with Jupiter or Artemis. But it's has since kind of morphed into a system. We use this word system all the time, system of beliefs and practices. But I use this word subjective because the definition changes over time, and it's a contested term. Like, this is why people use the word cult as a word of attack. It's like, oh, you don't have a religion, you have a cult, which is a way to try to delegitimize their community. So the boundaries of what is a religion is a contested boundary. And this goes back to the comment of civil religion. Can we call the performance of these certain rituals in the political space religious? Which is a good debate to have. A video on Sufism. I am going to do a video on Sufism. I can do a book pitch here. This is a recent book on Sufism. It just came out last year. It's pretty good. It's a history of Islamic mysticism. So yes, I'm going to do a video on Sufism, and it's going to be a little bit of a review of this book. Dean Little asks if I'll do a video on the Baha'i faith in the future, and I will. I visited Haifa in Israel last semester, and the Baha'i Gardens are there, so it's like the epicenter of the Baha'i faith. So I want to do a video on Baha'i and then bring in some of that footage I took at the Baha'i Gardens in Haifa. Genetically Modified Skeptic says, if you did a video about Jordan Peterson, you get more love and hate than ever before. Choose wisely on that one. Yeah. I want to, because he has this whole series on the Bible, and he's very Jungian and very much a perennial philosopher when it comes to religion. So I think my perspective that's more influenced by Durkheim and Jonathan Z. Smith would be an interesting counter to Jordan Peterson, but I'm just afraid to wade into that. Once I make videos on that, it suddenly becomes a debate channel about Jordan B. Peterson. So I'm hesitant. Do you recommend No God But God by Reza Aslan? As a Muslim, a bit hesitant. I thought it was good. As far as I know, I'm not an expert on Islam. I know a lot of people hate Reza Aslan. I don't think that book's bad. It's very readable. It's kind of dramatic, like he dramatizes early history of Islam. But in terms of like factual history, I think it's fine. I think Reza Aslan gets more hate than he deserves. I mean, some of it he does deserve. He's just a difficult person to get along with, from what I can tell. But he is still a scholar of religion. Vladimir Lenin says, you will be invaded by Nazis, don't do it. Yeah, that's why I have so many other videos on my list of videos to do that a video responding to Jordan B. Peterson is pretty low on my list. Let's see. A video on the decline of religiousness in Europe would be interesting. Yeah, this is one of my real big interests, is the so-called secularization thesis, the theory that religion is losing a hold on humanity. It's disappearing slowly. And I've never been convinced by that theory. Like, there's a decline in institutional religion in certain countries, especially in Scandinavia and Western Europe. But a lot of these people are not calling themselves atheist or agnostic. They still believe in something, whether that's a force or psychic abilities. Like this stuff, which is still kind of religious, has stuck around. So any talk we have about the decline of religiousness also has to be paired with a talk about, are they still religious, and can we really call it a decline? I didn't mention the Essenes in my Qumran video because I have a whole video on the Essenes, and I didn't want to rehash that. Also, it's still a theory. It's the Essene hypothesis. So I didn't want to say it's like definitely Essenes. I think it probably was. And I say that in my video on the Essenes. So that's why I didn't mention it. It was a combination of I've already done it, and I didn't want to get into the whole debate of the Essene hypothesis. I just referred to them as the community because that's what they call themselves. That's why the book, the community rule, is called the community rule. They call themselves the community. So I kept on using the phrase Dead Sea community or Qumran community, and I was doing that on purpose to try to avoid the Essene debate. Let's see here. Somebody asked when is my book coming out? I have a lot of book ideas, and I plan on writing them once I get my PhD. But it's going to be a few years. It's very much in the future. Lincoln says, I'm pretty sure it's just people who used to claim their non-practicing belief as religion are now not identifying as religious. Yeah, like the whole the whole religious but spiritual but not religious, I don't find convincing, because spiritual I would still say is religious. Fated Place says, my binary of religion versus religious works against you there. You should elaborate, because I'm curious what you mean. I'm open to criticism. Like, I'm not this all-knowing expert on religion. I know a lot about Christianity between year 300 and year 600, and the rest is like broadly reading. Religious affiliation, yeah. Affiliation is down, but the religious experience, is that down? Like, would people that no longer affiliate still say they have visions or still believe in ghosts? To me, that still falls under the umbrella of religious, even though it no longer falls under a specific system. I mean, theory on, I'm not alone on this. Jason Josephson Storm, whose book I reviewed when I did the video on Do We Still Believe in Magic? Thus, the restrictive definition of religion confines our ability to talk about being religious. Yeah, I agree. I don't think I have a restrictive definition of religion. I try to define it, and I define it with the caveat of any definition of religion needs to include identity, beliefs, and practices. But Jonathan Z. Smith has a very famous quote where he's like, it's not like religion cannot be defined. It can be defined 50 different ways with varying degrees of success. So there's a lot of really bad definitions of religion out there. And those are the ones that ignore belief and practice and identity. So for me, the actions, the rituals really matter. How do you pay for college? I'm technically not in college. I'm in a graduate program, and they pay me. So I get a salary from Boston University to teach and write my dissertation. Enough to live on, just barely. Let's see. All right, we are at 489 on Patreon and 49,942 on subscribers. So we are 58 away on subscribers, and I can't do math, 20-ish away on a 21. No, 11. Yeah, math. This is why I'm in a humanities program, not in a National Geographic. Okay, Nelson Galvin says, National Geographic magazine has many articles on religions. What do you think of their quality? They're okay. I think they kind of botched the rollout of the Gospel of Judas because they sensationalized it so much. But they had a recent article on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the archaeological excavation underneath the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and I thought it was pretty good. It was titled sensationally. It was like excavating the tomb of Jesus or something like that, and that's a sensational statement that no archaeologist would say. So it's okay. Fated Place. I keep referring to Fated Place's comments because they're all pretty good, and he's being critical of me, so I'm having a good academic discussion here. Part of why secularization thesis fails is precisely the older model's ability to explain these new religious activities beyond conventional religious affiliation. Okay. To explain these new religious activities beyond conventional religious. I think I agree with that. I think I agree with that. Is that different from what I was saying? You should contact me on Facebook, because this is a good discussion that needs to be had. Rashid the Skeptic says, genetically modified skeptic, I love your videos. Yes, genetically modified skeptic is in the chat. He is a atheist YouTuber. I find him respectful. I find his videos personal and informative because he talks both from a somewhat academic perspective, but also a personal perspective as an atheist. So check his channel out. Let's see. Is Lebanon a good place to research? I don't know about the academic institutions in Lebanon. I'm sure it is. You know, I know a lot about institutions in Israel because I researched there last semester. So Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University. So there's definitely. It's hard to beat the U.S. though. Some of the best religious studies scholars are U.S.-based scholars. So if you're looking to study this, to get a bachelor's degree or a PhD in this field, I can give you a short list, and a lot of them are here in the U.S. Let's see, so many questions. Do you refer to your videos in class? I try not to, honestly. I kind of view it as crass self-promotion if I were to do that. Like I'm there to help the students learn, and I'm not there to like promote. So if they discover my YouTube channel through the class, I'm cool with that. But no, I don't draw them specifically to it. A lot of the topics that I bring up in my YouTube videos come into the class. I just had a whole lecture on curse tablets in the Roman world, and a lot of that research was taken from my research for that video. So there is like a symbiotic relationship between my YouTube channel and my teaching, but I try not to promote it. Nicholas Getka asks, planning to stay in Boston after graduation? No, probably not. I love Boston, but I'm applying for jobs elsewhere. I might end up in Washington, D.C. I might end up back in Jerusalem, actually. But the sky's the limit. I'm going to try to get an academic job, work as a professor. If that doesn't work out, I'll go full-time with YouTube. But yeah. Let's see what else. Let's see. Audrey says, I've been interested in the role of women in the early Christian church. What are your initial thoughts on the matter? It's complicated. I always point people to 1 Corinthians because the opening chapters of 1 Corinthians talks about this wealthy woman named Chloe, who apparently was hosting the Corinthian church. So already in the New Testament, we have evidence of powerful, wealthy women involved. And then in the closing chapter of the Epistle of Romans, St. Paul references possibly a woman who carried the document to the church in Rome. So early on, there were leadership of some sort that were women. And then you have the Montanist movement, so this early sect of Christianity that was run in part by women. You had Montanists, and then he had like two prophetess, two women as serving as prophets side by side with him. So if you look outside the so-called proto Orthodox sect, you'll see, women involved. Let's see what else. Have you heard of the Tantor Ecumenical Institute in Jerusalem? I studied there. Cool. Yes, I have. I met a lot of really cool scholars at Tantor when I was there. Went out Went out with them for drinks in downtown Jerusalem several times. I believe it's a Catholic institution, but they allow anybody to do research there. They have a great library. Man, so many comments. Diego Rodriguez asks, is it necessary knowing Latin and ancient Greek to make religious studies PhD? It's necessary if you're going to do ancient religion. If you're going to do Greco-Roman religion, you need to know the ancient languages. I would say that if you're going to do a regional study PhD of some sort, whether that's the Middle East or Norse religion, you got to learn the language. You need to know ancient Greek, you need to know Arabic, you need to know Old Norse. And that's just so you can read the primary sources in their original languages. That's why it's a little easier to be like an Americanist. If you're an American that speaks English, there's not as much of a language requirement. How would one define a ritual? I have a video about that. And the scholar Catherine Bell has a lot to say about that too. In short, it's like acting that asserts difference. So, you can take a sip of wine at a Thanksgiving party, but taking that same sip of wine in a church administered by a ritual expert like a priest, suddenly that ritual takes on a different meaning and a sacred meaning. So Catherine Bell is the expert. She unfortunately passed away about a decade ago, but she's the reigning expert on ritual theory and ritualization. Brian Bent asks, what would the liturgy of sub-Roman Britain have looked like during the early Dark Ages? Would it have been resemble a Catholic traditional mass? From what I know, so I don't know that much about the early medieval period. That's after my field of study. From what I know, the liturgy that was at first extremely locally, there were local differences, and then it became less, like more unified as the years went on. So if I had my guess, the early Latin Mass, it would have looked like a traditional Latin Mass, even in the early medieval period. But that's just a hunch. There's certain liturgical acclamations that are almost universal, like the thrice holy chant, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." Like all liturgies have that. So I would look for. No offense, but why is ancient studies always typically limited to Roman Greece? It's just a habit. I study the Greco-Roman world, so yeah, of course. Near Eastern studies, ancient Near East is the term for Mesopotamia usually. Classics or ancient, I don't know, ancient history. Oftentimes when people say ancient history, they mean Greco-Roman history, and I think it's because the classics and Greco-Roman world has dominated the humanities for the past century, which is interesting. How can we nominate you show host religious studies series on Crash Course? I'd love that. I was a little disappointed with the Crash Course Mythology because it was so, I don't know, it was so literary. It was focusing on the literature, and I want to see a cultural studies approach. Let's see religious or sociology. Let's see anthropology. So the thing with Crash Course though is there are usually only like 40 episodes, and like, can you really do a comparative world religions course in 40 episodes? It would be impossible. My idea is to kind of become the Crash Course of religious studies. So have a series on Hinduism, a series on Buddhism, because it would be so difficult to do world religions in just 40 episodes. But having said that, thank you for the nomination, Genetically Modified Skeptic. John Green and Hank Green know of my channel because I did win their sponsorship a few years ago. So at least once they looked at the channel. I don't know how much they pay attention to it now. Bones asks, would you ever want to become a pastor or a priest? No. No, that's not what I do. No offense. I have a whole video on this, the difference between theology and religious studies, and I get that question all the time, and it's so frustrating for me. That's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Religious studies is very different from pastoral studies. What is an interesting new discovery? In my field, we've possibly found the church where the Council of Nicaea met. It's currently underwater in Turkey, like in a lake, which is kind of cool. There's an ongoing excavation at Megiddo, which is the so-called site of the apocalypse that the book of Revelation mentions. And like 2 years ago, the excavators at Megiddo found this like royal tomb, like fully articulated skeletons from the Bronze Age with like jewelry still on the skeletons. So really cool stuff coming out of Megiddo. Yeah, this is why I do archaeology, because in textual studies, we're not discovering new texts every summer, because we've always had the same ancient text, unless there's like a huge discovery like the Gospel of Judas. But if you study archaeology, you get new discoveries every summer, and it's awesome. It's really cool. It's possible to re-enter academia in your mid-20s. I have a non-history degree, but I want to go back and yeah, I mean, it depends on what level you want to go into. If you go back for a bachelor's, that's fine. But a lot of my colleagues in my program have re-entered academia at like age 30, 32, sometimes 35. Entering a PhD program is like a second career thing. So that's perfectly fine. Daniel Strauss asks, ever read anything from the field of performance studies? A lot, because my dissertation talks a lot about performativity. There's this scholar, Austin, who focuses on the performance of speech. So when you chant a specific spell or a specific way of a specific speech act, it's called speech act theory. It can have a power to it. It doesn't just convey information, but when you say a magical word, it's thought to have power. So a lot of my dissertation brings in performance studies on the speaking of certain powerful phrases from the liturgy, and how these powerful phrases end up on amulets and inscriptions. Alliterative is using crash course mythology with their students. It's fine. Like, I think some of the episodes were better than others. I'll say that. Also, shout out to Alliterative, which is another YouTube channel that I enjoy following. Welcome to the stream. Where can we find pictures of these sites? I think Wiki Commons is where I find a lot of my pictures. Just type in Megiddo and look up, see if the excavators have their own website, like Megiddo excavation. They'll probably have their own website, and what might have pictures. All right, Riley C has asked a heavy-hitting question. Thoughts on Christian Zionism, evangelical Christians who are pro-Israel? I see Christian Zionism as tied deeply to apocalypticism. A lot of these evangelicals have this fervent expectation of the second coming of Jesus in this age. And a lot of them look to world global events as possible hints at the apocalypse. So moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, for example, is viewed as a possible hint at the coming of Jesus. So I don't think it comes from understanding of the Israel-Palestine conflict. I don't think it comes from an understanding of the significance of Jerusalem. I think it comes from their own theology, their own eschatology of the end times. That's my read on the issue. And yes, I have an episode on the Dome of the Rock coming out tomorrow, and I mention Christian Zionism very briefly, but I mention it. Alliterative asks, thoughts on the biggest difficulties on doing field work? Well, I do not envy my colleagues who research people who are alive. So I research ancient people who are dead 2,000 years ago. I have colleagues that study evangelical Christianity in the 21st century, and they have to go into the field and interview people, observe people, make an ethnography, as it were. And they have all these legal restrictions. Sometimes they need to get like permission from the people to interview them. So they joke, I wish I was studying dead people because it's easier to study. When you find a fully articulated skeleton in a tomb in Megiddo, you don't need to ask their permission to publish. But if you're studying modern people, it's difficult. Also, it's kind of easy to study my field because I avoid a lot of controversies. When you study late antique Christianity, I don't really tick off the New Testament study people. I don't tick off Christians because I'm not talking about whether the New Testament was really historical or not. I'm just talking about John Chrysostom and Augustine hundreds of years later. So my research kind of avoids the controversies. But if you're studying the politics of the evangelical right, if you're studying like the historicity of Exodus, suddenly you can wade into really controversial research. And I don't envy people that focus on that. Let's see here. Who's my favorite philosopher, modern or ancient? I really, really like Seneca, the Stoic philosopher. I used to read Seneca as like a daily reader to just help me through life. He has good recommendations. Modern philosopher, I don't know. I don't read enough philosophy. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. It's the Dome of the Rock on top of an ancient meteorite. As far as I know, it's on top of a big chunk of bedrock. I mean, I've seen it. I got footage from inside the Dome of the Rock, and it's, from my understanding, bedrock, so it's not a meteorite. Let's see here. Andrew Benson asks, if you had to pick one, what extinct religion do you wish was still around so we could better study and understand their beliefs? Oh, man. So first of all, the whole time, this is something I've frequently thought about. Like, how can we talk about extinct religions, because we have a lot of revivalist religions, so-called neo-pagan religions that try to revive these older religions. I've also thought about the category of endangered religions that have dwindling populations. Is that a category we can use? I'm curious about Paleolithic religion. What did our ancestors 200,000 years ago, what was their religion? What beings did they think exist, and what rituals did they do? So that would be my answer. Like, if I could go back in time with a video camera and observe Paleolithic human communities, oh my gosh, that would be so fascinating. The invention of animal sacrifice, the invention of temples, like, my word, that would be cool. That's a side interest of mine. Spike of 2010 asks, new sub here, glad I found you. Awesome, welcome. Do I plan on doing a video discussing Zoroastrianism? So I have mentioned this on the stream, and I'm planning a video on Zoroastrianism. I put a poll out to my patrons a few weeks ago that said, would you rather see a video on Manichaeism or Zoroastrianism? And Zoroastrianism won the poll hugely. So I'm hoping to post that by the end of this year. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. A part of me wants to do an intro to Zoroastrianism, but it's such a big religion with really, really deep history. I don't know, what one video can't do it justice. So I'm thinking of just doing a video on Zoroastrianism in the 21st century. But we'll see. As an aside, we are $2 away from 500 on Patreon. So if 2 of you out of the 152 watching supported Patreon right now, we would be there. And we're still 49 away on the subscriber count. So we might actually, the Patreon might actually beat the subscriber count, which I wasn't expecting that. Leopoldo asks, how long does it take you to prepare an episode? It takes a long time. I'm a slow worker. It's partially because I have to teach, so I teach 3 days a week, grade papers. I have to write my dissertation. I try to write 500 words a day on my dissertation. So it takes me maybe 10 hours, 10 to 15 hours per video between getting the idea, researching it, writing the episode, filming the episode, and then editing the episode. So there's 5 parts, and each one of those parts is kind of hard. I like the researching and writing because that's easy for me. Editing is very difficult for me because I'm not very good at it. I don't mind the filming aspect. So if I'm going to be able to do 3 videos in October, and I'll be able to do 3 videos in September. So Dome of the Rock is coming out tomorrow. So I have gotten better. I've gotten faster, but it's a slog. It's hard. Running a YouTube channel is hard. Let's see here. You sound very busy to me. I am very busy, but it's fun. It's fun busy. You know, I study religion every day and make videos about religion and write about it. Like this is fun. It's cool. But I don't have much time. I sleep 7 hours a night. Try to work out, try to have a social life. Alliterative asks, thoughts on the importance of language study to understanding religious cultural concepts and examples. Again, shout out to Alliterative. He does some great etymological studies on words. Go check out his channel. Yeah, I think language study is massively important. The example of the Latin words religio and superstitio, and how Roman politics over what's correct religion and what's incorrect religion are wrapped up in these 2 categories. The debates over what is magic, the Latin word magia or the Greek word mageia, being this category of secretive, dark rituals. So language study for sure can tell us a lot about how cultures think about these rituals. And at least in the Roman world, they had these ideas of what should fall under mageia. More broadly speaking, I mean, you have all these liturgical languages, you know, like the Coptic language being used by the Coptic Christians in Egypt as being this liturgical language. So that's very interesting to see how certain languages become sacred languages. So, you know, Jews living in the Second Temple period are speaking mostly Aramaic, but Hebrew was still used as this sacred language. So yeah, I think any linguist would have a field day with religious studies for sure. Let's see here. Looking for more questions. Diego Rodriguez says there's a video uploaded by Kurzgesagt that argues about reforming the calendar starting with the construction of Göbekli Tepe. Do you like the idea? I love Kurzgesagt. It's an amazing channel. I watch every one of their videos as soon as they're uploaded. I thought that video had a good idea. I think we should reform the calendar. Everyone is mad at me for using CE and BCE instead of AD and BC. At least once a day I get a comment saying, oh, you must hate Christianity because you say CE instead of AD. And I think all of these calendrical systems are invented. Like, it's not, I'm not using it as a political statement. It's just I got to pick something. So I agree with Kurzgesagt that we should reform the calendar. Starting with Göbekli Tepe is just completely arbitrary. Like, why not start with the invention of animal sacrifice or, you know, whatever. But I do have a video on Göbekli Tepe. I don't think it's a temple. I don't think that's the right word for it. But it's definitely some sort of cultic site of communal gathering. There's evidence that it was used for feasting. butchering and eating animals, and ritual meals is very common. All right, people are starting to say that we hit 500. We have, yeah, $501 on Patreon. Awesome. Great. We beat the subscribers. I thought the subscribers were going to win for sure. We're still 48 away for 50,000, and my bedtime is in 10 minutes. But there's so many people still watching. I don't know if I want to leave. Avon McMaster, I'm trying to edit a podcast and you're being too interesting. My favorite Roman religion words so far are phos and nephos. Congrats on the 50K and 500. Avon is an excellent scholar, a good friend of the show. Met her at VidCon. Yeah, glad to hear that I'm distracting you from podcast editing. As an aside, Avon is a big supporter of starting a Religion for Breakfast podcast, which I'm still thinking about doing. Ever plan on making a video on Mormonism? Yes. Mormonism is so interesting in so many different ways, mostly because it kind of breaks this category. It's no longer new. It's been around for a long time. So it's kind of fallen out of the field of new religious movements into its own subfield of study. So it's kind of it's matured, which is an interesting question. When is a new religious movement no longer new? So that's one thing I would talk about if I ever did a video on Mormonism. Podcast would be fire. Yes, podcast, please. Okay, I got to do a podcast. Opinions on Step Back History. Step Back History. Tristan is a friend and a colleague, and you should follow his channel. He's a history channel. Has started going more into politics, so be prepared for that. But I think he is a good faith actor on YouTube, interested in educating the public about history. Our channels started around the same time, and yeah, we've kind of been parallel channels for years. And I also met him in person at VidCon. So personal shout out to Step Back History. As an aside, I reach out to him all the time for advice. I think he's a better YouTuber than me. He puts more thought into his YouTube channel. So he's a good colleague on this space. More talk about the podcast. Great. I'm getting so much positive feedback about this podcast idea. I think I'm actually going to do it because I was very hesitant. So Crusher Pants, live stream once a week on a regular schedule. Take the audio and release it as a podcast. Oh man, but it's Crusher Pants, shout out. He's a longtime friend as well. So much of this is just me talking though, like pausing, and I don't know. That is a good idea, I guess. There's currently a debate about Richard Carrier and Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman is a scholar of New Testament. I've never met him personally. I've seen him in person, and he's a good scholar. He's an expert on the text, the actual New Testament codices and papyrus fragments. Don't particularly want to talk about Richard Carrier. He's not a kind person. I prefer, the term collegial. I like collegial academics, and he insults his interlocutors. Let's see here. Bart Ehrman is more critical. Well, he comes across as having a chip on his shoulder. He used to be pretty conservative, went to Wheaton College, which is an evangelical college. I think was studying to be a pastor for a time being. So there might be some sort of a chip on his shoulder. I don't think it's as bad as some people say. He's not out to deconvert anybody, but I think because he comes across as a little pugnacious, possibly abrasive in his public lectures, that some people see that as critical. What's my favorite gospel? I would say Mark. I think Mark's the most interesting gospel, at least in the canon. just because it's so early, it just ends. You know, if you cut out the added chapter, it ends before it's confirmed that Jesus resurrected, which is interesting. So debates over that extra extra chapter in Mark makes it even more interesting. Genetically modified skeptic. If you did live streams chatting about religion with YouTubers, you'd do well. You could alternate with scholars. That's a great idea. Yeah. I should do more live streams. This is my first live stream with the channel, and it's kind of intimidating. I've only done it with the patrons before. So far so good. I'm losing my voice, so that's not good, but all right. All right. So this is the 5th time I've seen this question. What are your thoughts on DMT or ayahuasca? I don't know enough about it, but from my understanding, it's some sort of hallucinogenic substance. And the only thing I know about hallucinogens and religion is the Boston University study that I mentioned earlier about divinity school students taking LSD to have some sort of religious experience. I think there's a really broad bibliography on taking substances like this and trying to have a religious experience. So I don't know enough about it to talk about it with expertise, but I know there's talk about the Oracle of Delphi in Greece getting high on some sort of fumes in the basement of the Temple of Apollo. And I think this is all fair. I think it's an easy cop-out to say, oh, that religious experience was just brought on by drugs. I mean, it's not usually proven, but today you can do a ethnography of this. Let's see. I don't know who Neil Postman is, actually. Should I know who that is? Let me Google him real quick. By the way, we're at 49,955. So the Patreon won the race. So that's cool. Thank you everyone for supporting the show. This money is going to go towards bringing the channel to another level. I'm kind of hoping to eventually make Religion for Breakfast more of like the crash course of religious studies. So series on Islam and Christianity, a series on the history of religious liberty laws in the United States, which is something I've already written all the episodes for. So yeah, your support is awesome. If I ever could go full time with YouTube, that would be amazing, because then I could focus on these videos much more. But let's see. Have you ever done any research on the influence of non-Islamic folk religion upon certain movements within? I have not. I took a whole class on Sufism, but it really was focusing on like 10th and 11th century Sufism, Al-Ghazali, some of these famous mystics. We didn't do much about like early Islam. And yeah, I have this book right here on Sufism. So I know a thing or two about Sufism, but not enough to like talk about influences. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I'm reading Al-Ghazali. It's great. That was a lot of fun. That class was my class on Sufism was really fun. Let's see here. Alliterative asks, would you consider religion a human universal? I think certain religious impulses are universal. So some cognitive scientists argue that the earliest religion among humans was born out of human tendencies to ascribe agency to non-humans. So we like to see faces in trees. We like to see emotions in animals. If we get a spooky chill because of a sound that we heard, or the leaves rustling, we are quick to attribute agency to that. So that, I think, is universal to humans, ascribing agency to non-humans. So in that respect, you could say some sort of religious impulse is universal. Whether that's universal to the point of constructing these belief systems, these identities around certain religious systems. I don't know. I'm too afraid to say for sure if that's universal. I would liken it to languages. Is language? I mean, alliterative. You're probably a good person to ask about this. Is language a human universal? Because it's also a very similar impulse, the impulse to communicate, but then to create systems that are categorized into different languages. I think there's a lot of similarities between how we categorize languages and how we categorize religions. What do you think about the relationship between architecture and religious experience? These are great questions. Oh my gosh. I think architecture facilitates religious experience sometimes. Whether you're walking, so let's talk about the cult of Mithras. The Mithraea are these underground, cramped spaces with the image of Mithras at one end, and that must facilitate whatever rituals they were doing. You're kind of gathering in a dark space, looking at the divine image. You can think about how a Catholic cathedral or a Greek Orthodox basilica aids the liturgy and how the liturgy functions in the sacred space. All the way to like a non-architectural space, like a sacred grove, where there's a sacred tree or a sacred stream, being sites of where kami gather, the Japanese intermediary beings, or where demons might gather. Yeah, sacred space, architecture, and religious experience are deeply intertwined. Deeply intertwined. Yeah, I'm almost more interested in like shrines, saint shrines, especially in late antique Christian practice, where if you were sick with a particular sickness, you would go to like the shrine of Saint Thecla or the shrine of Saint Anthony, and then miracles would happen. Like this idea of miracles happen more at these sites of power. Magical ritual kind of congregates around these sites too. So yeah, architecture, sacred space, one of my specialties actually. So something I thought a lot about. Sassafras Squatch says, "Hey, I wanted to swing by and say I love your channel. Your editing is great. Information is incredibly clear. Thank you so much. It's been a crazy journey, and I've been enjoying it along the way." Shinto Buddhist duality in Japan is interesting. Shrines and temples. Yeah, I agree. I've still been meaning to write a series on Shintoism. That's something I've promised to my patrons, so that's definitely going to happen. Just because I'm interested in Japan, I think I said this earlier, but I've been training in karate and kendo for a long time. Not so much recently, but I've been introduced to Japanese culture from a young-ish age, and my interest in Shintoism stems from that. All right. We are past my bedtime, but that's pretty sudden. So I'm going to say 5 minutes, 5-minute countdown that I'm going to bed. I have to lecture tomorrow, and I still have to prep my lecture for tomorrow. Thank you everyone for joining. I had no idea that 150 people would show up and that we would get to $500 on Patreon. We're at 49,959 subscribers, so we are almost to 50,000 subscribers. I'll probably fall asleep and wake up to 50,000, which is really cool. And we hit $500. Thank you. And if anyone wants to jump on the Patreon bandwagon, I do live streams like this every month for $5 patrons. This was my first time with the full channel, it was kind of nerve-wracking, but I'm glad I did it. But yeah, if you want to have more regular contact with me, I chat with my patrons all the time. Nicholas Getka asks, ever consider recording and posting your lectures? I've thought about it. I'm a little nervous too, though, because I consider that to be like a relationship I have with my students, and to record it and put it out on the YouTube channel, I'd have to think about it. I know some professors have done that, so. No Mind asks or says, I'm so happy I contributed to Patreon tonight. Thank you. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. Like I said, I'm trying to make this channel into something bigger. I'm trying to go, like, this was phase 1 of Religion for Breakfast. After 50,000, I'm like, I want to have phase 2, which is more frequent videos, longer series. Like I said, I have already written a 15-episode series on religious liberty, the history of religious liberty in the United States. I'm planning a series on Islam. So to do that, I need more time. I need some help with the editing, and the Patreon is just is so necessary. Ryan Hops, as much as I would love to see your lectures posted online, I don't agree with professors do that. See, I don't agree with them either. Like, that feels weird to me. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind if I was giving a public talk to record that, like giving an academic paper. But like the students, like, I feel like I'm lecture prepping for them. I'm not prepping a lecture for the public. So yeah, maybe releasing the transcripts. That's a good. I don't know. I'm going to think about it, but for sure, I would consider filming my papers that I give at conferences. I'm giving a paper at a conference this coming Saturday. It's a conference on religion and technology at Boston University. If anyone is based in Boston, you should come to that conference. Fated Place says technically the university owns them. Yeah, I think that's the case. So I wonder how people like Jordan Peterson can get away with recording those. Yeah. Am I writing a book? I'm writing a dissertation, and I have several book ideas, but the dissertation needs to be finished first. Tenure. Yeah. Yep. That thing. That's a thing. Okay. Head off. Head off to bed. Thank you, everyone, for dropping in. Thank you, Genetically Modified Skeptic, for dropping in. Yeah, I'd love to make more contacts in the atheist community, or anyone talking about religion on YouTube. So many questions still going by, but don't have time. I have sleeping to do. As an official count, we're at 49,958. So we are 42 subscribers short of hitting 50,000, but we're at $501 on Patreon. So we hit the Patreon goal. We did not hit the 50,000 goal, but we will hit it tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for dropping in. I hope to do this again sometime in the future. Stay tuned for the video on the Dome of the Rock. I'm uploading it tomorrow, and I'll see y'all later. Good night.